Zelensky understands that his days are numbered, that his bright image, as he tried to build it among the people, has long faded. Zelensky understands that his days are numbered, that his bright image, as he tried to build it among the people, has long faded. With the exception of that part of the population that reflects radical, ultra-right, revanchist, Bandera views, there are quite a few such people there too. The negotiations ended with the results of the preliminary ones that were achieved there, now being reported to the President of Russia and the President of the United States. As agreed by Putin and Trump, they discussed issues, primarily the issues of safe navigation in the Black Sea. And this is not the first attempt. The first attempt was back in July 2022, when the UN Secretary-General together with the Turkish President Erdogan mediated, and, with specialists representing Ukrainian and Russian structures, agreed on a package. The package consisted of two parts. The first part involved ensuring simplified methods for the delivery of Ukrainian grain through the Black Sea via the straits while inspecting ships, to ensure there was no fraud and that the transport of grain was not used for delivering weapons instead of going for a new batch of grain. Inspection procedures were agreed upon, and they worked for a whole year, but after this we were forced to stop this process, at least take a pause, because the second part of the package, which was an integral part of it, was completely sabotaged. It was about removing all obstacles on the path of exporting Russian grain and fertilizers. This was related to including all ships carrying Russian agricultural products, including fertilizers, in prohibited lists. The Lloyd Company, which insures these ships, raised the rates, and transferring money for our products' deliveries was also complicated. The Roselkazbank was disconnected from SWIFT, and much more happened that aimed at inflating prices. As European farmers created a situation of unfair competition, our Western colleagues' bias manifested when Ukrainian grain dumped onto European markets, although its quality was far from meeting existing standards in this area. Overall, the West did everything to shield Ukraine as much as possible and to punish the Russian Federation as much as possible. Therefore, when a year after that Black Sea initiative came into effect, the The UN Secretary General shrugged and said he couldn't get anything done. We said, well, let's return to this deal when you succeed. And we simply withdrew from the Ukrainian part, which was approved for a year, and as the year expired, we did not renew this deal. The memorandum between Russia and the UN stating the need to remove all obstacles to exporting Russian grain and fertilizers, which constitute a much larger share in the global markets than Ukrainian. The memorandum was valid for 3 years and continues to be so until July of the current year. UN Secretary General Guterres and his representatives are constantly in contact with us. They try to help somehow, but are seeking ways not through principled cancellation of sanctions by demanding the West. If the West truly cares about the interests of developing countries, the global majority, especially in Africa, regarding food security, to lift discriminatory measures. But the Secretary General went another way. He decided to look for loopholes in those sanctions imposed by the West, not demanding their repeal, and moreover, respecting and complying with these sanctions, which for a UN official, any UN official, much less for the Secretary General, is absolutely unacceptable. Because the Charter states that no staff member of the UN Secretariat, including the Secretary General or his deputy, has the right to receive instructions from any government. If the Secretary General is looking for loopholes between sanctions, acknowledging their existence, he is abiding by decisions made in capitals where there are governments of UN member countries, and he has no right to do that. Therefore now, our negotiators, appointed by President Putin in Riyadh, reminded their American colleagues about this entire story and said that given the track record of Ukraine itself and the entire Black Sea history, we would like there to be no ambiguities this time. They also reminded that when in 2023, we left, the Ukrainian part of the initiative expired, we withdrew from it, and following this, President Erdogan attempted 2 or 3 times to revive it. A year ago, he strongly requested our support in simplifying this initiative, without physical inspections of empty ships returning after unloading grain and fertilizers. And we were even willing to agree to this. Then at the last moment, Erdogan said that Zelensky wants to agree not to strike nuclear infrastructure objects, although Zelensky himself had struck the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. But since this proposal came from Kiev, we agreed to it, also without any special verification mechanisms. Thus, we complied with all of President Erdogan's requests and the request that Erdogan was suddenly handed by Zelensky at the last moment, for unclear purposes. And we said yes. But then Erdogan called Putin and said that Zelensky changed his mind. Considering all these changes of mind, and the fact that each time a ceasefire was suddenly announced, and Ukraine agreed to it only because at that specific historical moment in question, Ukraine found itself in an untenable position on the battlefield. As soon as a pause took place, immediately, within weeks or a couple of months, this ceasefire was grossly violated, as was the case throughout the duration of the Minsk agreements. Therefore, we now need the clearest, most specific, verifiable, functioning guarantees and mechanisms. As President Putin said at a press conference with President Lukashenko a few days ago, he supports President Trump's initiative to declare a 30-day ceasefire, not only to stop strikes against energy infrastructure or marine infrastructure in the Black Sea, but a general 30-day ceasefire. He said that we support it, but considering the length of this line, considering the ability of the Ukrainian military to create provocations, they just struck Sudza, the gas pumping station, and said that Russia did it themselves. Although Sudza is our own property, which is crucial for the continued supply of energy to several European countries. Now it is impossible to do, just as it is impossible to use the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, which reflects the interests of businesses in Kazakhstan and the United States. One of its pumping stations, Kropotkinskaya, was attacked, and this damage cannot be quickly repaired. Thus, once again, oil pumping volumes for European consumers will sharply decline due to another terrorist act by Ukrainians. Therefore, when the president said that we are for the ceasefire, but there are nuances, like who will ensure the integrity of the Nazi regime in Kiev. We also favor considering ways of not causing any damage to energy infrastructure. It is not in our interests. As the president said, we support the resumption of the Black Sea Initiative in some form that is more acceptable to everyone. The Black Sea Initiative was discussed as a priority in Riyadh. Our position is simple, as I have just outlined approximately, we cannot take Zelensky's word for it.
Зерна и удобрений.